Why we must accept the existence of free will. Free will cannot be proven to exist, but neither can reality. I reference the Chinese butterfly riddle. Yet, like reality, we must accept the existence of free will to function. How do we make decisions if not for free will? One of the biggest arguments against free will is the notion that everything is determined either by the environment or genetics. Who we are and what we think is determined by these factors. But how are we to determine that what we think is correct if this is the case? You can't say what I think is true because my parents are from Scandinavia. Therefore, we need free will to justify what we think. If you want to say you think what you do because you thought about the possible answers to a certain question and discarded the ones that were incorrect, you need free will. You need to be able to say you could have chosen the wrong answer, but decided not to. Because think what the alternative is. Do you really want to say you don't have the ability to change your mind if you are wrong? But if that is the case, if you can change your mind, isn't that free will? You can't have it both ways. I hear people complain about leftist infighting and simultaneously complain about cancel culture on the left. These are such vague terms though, and honestly when dissected, I don't think either is bad always. You should be able to disagree in the circles you inhabit so they don't become echo chambers, and on the flip side, certain behaviors should get you ostracized. It's okay for a community to have standards. J.K. Rowling got canceled for being a transphobe, and I think it's a good thing that she did. Bigotry should not be tolerated. On the other hand, the left should be open to discourse on strategy. I think this is the place to draw the line. So long as our objectives are the same, I think it's safe to say we are on the same side. Most of the time, unless somebody suggests something so ridiculously stupid that they must either have the brain the size of a gnat or they are a grifter like Jimmy Dore. I don't see how anybody can think forcing the vote could work or think that Tucker Carlson deserves more respect than AOC, unless, of course, you don't give two shits about the movement. This was a similar problem during the civil rights movement. Malcolm X rightly criticized people like MLK for endangering his followers and the immoral tactics that MLK was using. But he eventually realized MLK sincerely wanted change, and sincerity is the important part. I have no problem liking a tweet from Tim Pool if he says something good, regardless how much he personally believes what he said. But I will never associate closely with him, because he will stab you in the back the moment the zeitgeist changes. This is also where criticism of Vosh comes in, and I think he does get a little too friendly with people like Shu. It's okay to push people left, but when you entangle yourself with these individuals, you risk becoming corrupted. Move on from Joe Manchin. Conservative Democrats in the South are a dead end. You're not going to change their mind, and you can't primary them because a progressive isn't going to win in the South. People will say Georgia went blue, but Georgia has Stacey Abrams, and even she didn't win the governorship. But if a high-profile figure is registering people to vote in West Virginia, then sure, I'll support you when you demand to primary the bastard. But there is nobody like that there yet. Instead, what we should do is continue to primary conservative Democrats in massively blue areas. We should surround people like Joe Manchin so that he is crushed and drowned out. Don't shame people into doing more. When people shitpost online, don't tell them they should be doing more. What they are doing is already doing more than what a lot of other people are, and I can assure you this has a massive effect. Conformity is a powerful tool for shaping society, as is breaking conformity. And simply speaking up is important for shifting the zeitgeist. Rather, if you want people to do more, honor the people who are doing the most, like Stacey Abrams and AOC. If you do that, people will then chase after that prestige by doing what those people do. Save your vitriol for the people standing in the way of change. How history is like the scientific method. The scientific method was one of the most groundbreaking ideas ever developed. It began with Aristotle and was refined by the Muslims and then by Europeans. Instead of formal logic, which isn't a bad way of coming to conclusions, people now had one other tool to prove their ideas. That is through tests with controls. History is a lot like that. The more often you see a phenomenon throughout history, despite different factors, the more you can be assured that this factor is the driving cause. If that something is the only consistent factor among everything else, you can be sure of its validity. Take, for example, social change. If you study the history of social movements over thousands of years all over the world, and they do the same things despite wildly different settings, and they succeed, then you know these methods work. And on the flip side, if the social movement fails and they did something differently, or didn't do something that every other successful social movement did, then you are able to judge what they did wrong. In this way, historians are very much like scientists analyzing research. Are we headed toward another civil war? A lot of conservatives think we are headed toward another civil war. Just look at all the militias they have. And for a while, I thought this was silly, and for the most part, I still do. A civil war in a modern, developed nation, what would that even look like? Well, there have been internal struggles like that. Think of the Troubles in Ireland. And if the Klan was just a little bit more stubborn, we probably would have had something like that going on in the South. Instead, what happened was the troops were sent in and the Klan backed down. I imagine the same thing is going to happen in the future. The South will grow increasingly authoritarian. The North, like it did with slavery and segregation, will implement federal laws and send in troops to enforce them. What happens next is a coin toss. It could go the way of segregation, where the South will back down and bend the knee, but there is a chance it will have to be pummeled into submission. Ultimately, it doesn't matter. I don't feel sympathy for Republicans. As society changes, the more you remain the same, the more you should be judged. The more entrenched you are in your sociopathic, irrational beliefs, the less I care what happens to you. I don't like feeling bad. I prefer to feel happy, or at least indifferent. And if a person dies and I don't have to feel sad, I won't. If somebody is willfully ignorant and this leads to their demise, I'm not going to weep. I see in movies and books a message of don't let vengeance consume you, and I think this is true. But by that same token, a similar message should be reiterated. Don't let guilt consume you. Don't even let it touch you if you can help it. Very few of even the most leftist individuals say we should be entirely without a military or police. Not even MLK thought that. So we agree sometimes killing is necessary. Maybe a psychologist will say differently. But do you think it's healthy to tell a soldier suffering from PTSD over a killing he did that he should feel guilty over that death and continue to dwell on it constantly? Or do you think it would be better to tell him it was war and, depending on the circumstance, that he had to do what he did? If the South chooses war over peace, that's on them. I'm not going to feel shame. Hannibal was told, war or peace, it matters not to Rome. And I think a similar option should be given to the South.